Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Real Hustle Creatives Unplugged. My name is Laura Key. I'm an actor, host, and voiceover artist, and I've been working in the Singapore media industry since 2008. I'm also an advocate for media workers in Singapore. Now, today's episode is about a very practical and interesting topic. It's about contracts and the realities of contracts for creative freelancers in Singapore. And today I have three guests with me. I'm very excited for today's conversation. First of all, we have Jaga. Jaga is an executive secretary of VICPA. Now, VICPA is a Visual, Audio, and Creative Content Professionals Association Singapore, and Jaga is very passionate about empowering creative freelance professionals in Singapore to build sustainable and thriving careers. And next up, we have Tan Siew An. Now, Siew An, she is a freelance writer. She specializes in digital marketing blog content for software companies. She's also trained in law, and she writes a very helpful fortnightly email newsletter for freelancers to update them on latest freelance news and to share her business insights as well. And of course, last but not least, we have Audrey Lim. Now, Audrey Lim is a well-known voice. You might have heard her on radio. So she's very experienced in radio presentations, documentary hosting. She does music production and management, entertainment law, content creation. It just goes on and on. And of course, she's also an advocate for the arts. She is the president of the Visual Arts Development Association Singapore. Now, diving straight into today's conversation, I'm going to start with a very practical question, okay, to our two creative freelancers here. What are the realities of contracts in Singapore? How often are you actually offered contracts in Singapore? Siew An?
So I would say that I'm offered contracts maybe about half the time. And I find that usually the companies that offer contracts are the larger ones. So these are companies that have more systematic processes in place. They regularly hire vendors, contractors. And so whenever they want to hire someone new, they just pull out their template contract and give it to me. But on the other hand, I find that smaller companies, they tend to be more relaxed on their requirements for contracts because they have more flexible processes. And so in this case, maybe if I'm doing like a bigger project that's going to last some time, I will be the one to offer the contract instead.
So you're completely okay offering your own contract as well, depending on the job.
I do. So I do have like a contract template which I modify for various projects accordingly.
And where do you get this contract template from?
So I wrote it myself, but I also reference
Because a lawyer background.
It helps.
Yeah. We all had lawyer backgrounds.
but I did reference like other template terms as well. So I just kind of pull them together and modify them to meet my own like unique situation.
Also talking about the bigger company and the smaller company, right? Is it because smaller companies operate on trust, or you think
bit
just
as
cannot
well.
be bothered to just...
Yeah, because I would think smaller companies, I also tend to work with the founders directly. So there's a bit more trust involved. I don't need to go through their middle management, like their managers or their legal counsel. Usually just like a casual conversation, and then we negotiate how to go from there.
But of course, it's always better to have
Yes,
a contract
of
like, at the
course,
end of the day
definitely.
as well. Audrey, you want to share your experiences?
It really depends on the type of job. So I would say on average, if I'm talking about voiceover work, I see a contract one every 100 voiceover jobs versus acting where I see a contract one every 2 acting jobs. So I feel it very much depends on the business reality of every individual industry and what that specific industry, sub-industry within entertainment is comfortable doing.
So, Siew An, you actually shared a bit about like your contracts experience. Like, do you actually have variations in contracts? So like you started with something, then after a while, then there were some changes, and then how do you go about dealing with such variations?
So right now, the only one I can think of was a project that kind of went sideways. Okay, because I'm a writer, so I was writing this article. And then first we agreed that, okay, the article is going to be about this scope. And then, so I wrote the article accordingly. But what happened was that the client showed it to the end client, and then the end client wanted something else. And then so...
Change everything.
Yeah,
slowly.
to accommodate the end client's request, I would have to like practically rewrite the article. And that was not what I was willing to do for the same rate. So I said, okay, I can do this, but then I will need to like charge as if I was writing a new article because it's practically writing a new article.
Yep.
And then the client was not willing to pay that. So we kind of just like ended the project there.
So were you paid for the original?
No, I was not.
Not at all.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is this case like, is there like a clause or something that you could put in if you've already done work? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was also my internal policy. Like, if you're not happy with my work for whatever reason, I will just not charge because I don't want you to have to pay for work that you're not satisfied with for whatever reason.
I absolutely do not have that policy. If I put in the hours and I put in the work, I don't care if you've changed your mind.
Yeah.
The work has been done, the hours have been put in. Girl, stand up for yourself. It's okay. No. They can't change their mind and then just not pay you.
Which is why I believe that contracts are very important. The intent of having contracts is to have clarity from both parties in terms of what is then the scope. So in our circumstances, when we've spoke to many of them who faces issues in terms of payment or scope, we realize that the clarity is also not there. That means they put it in too simple. We have come across members who actually take up jobs in WhatsApp.
Yep.
And that is something we discourage. But we will encourage them to at least have some basic, and you don't need to be a lawyer to draft those contracts. Yeah, so it's very simple terms that has to be covered, and importantly, the scope. And I think in your case, I would have at least asked for some money that you have already agreed
For work done
upon, for the
already.
work done.
Correct.
Yeah. So many freelancers tell me that they dare not ask for it is because when they ask, they feel that how come others don't ask? I'm the one who's trying to spoil market by asking for a contract. But I think what Siew did was good. When people don't offer, she offered contracts. So it is not just the responsibility of the person who hires you, but it's also the responsibility of freelancers yourself to protect yourself.
So if they don't offer you a contract, would you like what Siew does? Give them a contract?
I know that the correct answer is please get a contract. But the practical realities of the situation for my industries is that if you show up on the day, there is no one who's going to ask you to, oh, could you find me a printer? Oh, could you sign my contract?
Yep.
So I feel that the better solution as we're trying to implement this might be the practice of having the contracts arrive earlier. So there's time for contractual review. So there's time for contractual negotiation. And that is a practical reality that I would love to see.
Actually, I totally agree with that. So if you look at it in the context of an employee-employer, we do get the contracts in advance.
Yeah.
You look at the terms, you sign the contract before you turn up for the job for the first day.
Yes.
So hence, I think for freelancers, this should be no different. And I think you should have actually given sufficient time to read through the terms, especially when there are long contracts given by companies where they have lawyers to write contracts. They may actually have a lot of hidden things that you may not be aware of. Especially, for example, like content creators, IP, copyrights. So they may have written who owns the copyrights, and sometimes you may not have actually taken a look on those areas, on where is the use. So it is important that you are given a fair chance to read through, sign before you turn up for the...
A lot of jobs in our industry are not long-term jobs, right? When you're an employee, you work there for, you could work there for 10, 20 years, maybe 1 year, 2 years, but at least, a longer period of time. A lot of freelancers, we turn up for a one-day job. Voiceover could be a 1-2 hour
Yep.
job. And sometimes a bit of a hassle, I think, for producers to produce contracts for every single person on set during that one-day job.
I think in my opinion, regardless of the nature of the period of contracts, so for short-term contracts, you know that these are standard ones. So you can even have a template of a template, right? That means you have already written it before of like how it will look like. So you don't need to start from scratch.
I do agree with Laura that it is easier said than done, especially when you meet up against people or bang up against the door, people who are like, who are you? You're here for like 30 minutes. Just sign the thing and go. That's the practical reality of it. So we're not going to pretend that that's not happening. It is happening.
yeah.
This is the truth. And on your earlier point about WhatsApp being just a communication method, a written contract is better than an oral contract any day. So if you're just getting all the terms down in WhatsApp, that is much preferable than anything else.
They're not getting anything.
Instead of zero, right? Instead of like he said, she said, get it on WhatsApp. As long as the key elements are there, everything that you said works just as well for WhatsApp. There is a small adjustment where they've actually approved service of legal documents via Facebook Messenger. So if Facebook Messenger is legally acceptable, WhatsApp is equally acceptable. Of course, gold standard.
Instagram, TikTok.
I'm sure can. But gold standard is an actual written contract, but WhatsApp is better than nothing. So
Yeah, absolutely.
get something.
I think any form of written, it does protect you because you have something to at least refer to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now let's just delve a little bit deeper. Why do we need contracts in the first place? Why is it important? And what kind of key terms must always be in contracts? Maybe Audrey, you want to start this time?
Sure. Yeah. I think that the key ideas are who are the parties. So make sure your name is there, make sure their name is there. What is the scope? Like, what is it that they need you to do? Are you supposed to be writing an article? Are you supposed to be performing something for them? How long is this thing going to go for? What is the duration of the term of this project? Is it just one project? Is it 1 year? Things like when are you going to get paid? Are there payment milestones? Things like what happens if you can't fulfill? What happens if you suddenly fall sick or you need to get a substitute in? What happens if they decide to change the scope of the project? What happens if they decide to shut down? What if they decide that the funding gets cut off? So all these things might be useful for you to think about.
I think Audrey put up very well about what are some of the areas. And these are all available on TAFEP's website. As I mentioned earlier, there is a template which covers these key terms that you need to have in terms of contracts. Apart from the names, the scope, I think in terms of payment, this is where you need to pay more attention to.
Yeah.
Where you think that the project is longer, it is important then for you to put in that milestone payment and be very clear about what is that milestone achievement so that there's no dispute about it as well. Also for projects that involve large costs. I mean, as freelancers, you don't have a fixed salary and it depends on kind of projects that you do. So it is important for you to protect the cash flow of your own self when you take up projects. And this is something that you know. And the part about dispute resolution, people always feel that when you do things, everything will go well. I mean, we all hope so.
We all go into
Yeah, we all
marriages hoping that also at the end of the
Good
day.
to have that. But it's also important to then think about if it doesn't go the way that we wanted, then how do you go about? So it's important that you discuss those difficult things up front, at least some basic ones about how do you go about. So usually, at least you come to terms and mutually agree on variations, or if not, then you seek a third party, a mediation route before. So you can do it in a progressive way rather than in an extreme way. Straight away, you go for a legal suit or court, that kind of thing, right? Then the intent of it is not there, which is to build a harmonious relationship. So when you start, it's important that you to start right.
To go back to the topic about why do we need contracts, Jacob, do you want to talk a little bit about why? Why is it so important for
I
us
think
to have contracts?
two key areas. So first is clarity, not just for the freelancer, but also for the person who's hiring the service buyer. Second, if you have clarity, we think that it will then lead to a harmonious relationship. And that is very important because when you go into projects, you are not just doing it as a service, but you're also trying to build that relationship as well. And then for future projects and also your portfolio building up. So clarity as well as harmonious relationship between the two parties.
But in various roles, as I always say, we do have kind of various variations in our sense. For instance, in my role as an actor, sometimes theatre, we have things like rehearsals, different payment milestones. Also, in terms of maybe late payment, is there something that either of you do charge? Is there something late payment interest?
Currently, I don't. Yeah, but I think it would be good to have one late payment interest clause, especially if you are getting paid only after the work is done. Because if you are getting paid before the work is done, usually clients are very fast to pay you because they want to start the project on time. But it's only like, if you're getting paid only after the work is done, then they might start to drag their feet because you're already given them what you are supposed to give them. And then so they might just take longer than they should to pay you.
I think the other thing is also like overtime fees. That's something that maybe more familiar to audience,
Yes.
right? Overtime fees and how do you charge overtime fees, all these kind of things. Also cancellation policies.
And the number of revisions that they can do.
Yes, cancellation policies, postponement and cancellation policies. I think these perhaps are not very talked very often. And if we don't have an official contract, we probably will not have that.
It is gold standard to have all of these things put down. But the practical reality is that whoever is writing the contract will put in things that benefit them and casually forget to put in things that don't benefit them. So it is important to be able to have a conversation, to go back to the first question, right? About these contracts and what is in them, what is not.
I think the next thing I would like to talk about is also intellectual property rights. I think maybe Siew might be a bit familiar with that. How do you kind of institute that in your contracts?
So I think it's good to first know what is the starting point for IP ownership in Singapore. So in general, if you are doing work for someone else, that client will be the one who owns the IP. And so you have to first be aware of this and know whether it's okay with you or not. I think for me, I'm fine with it because when I write an article, I'm writing it for the client. I cannot use it for anything else. So I think it's common sense for me to just like assign the IP to the client.
Yeah.
But I think maybe in some other fields, it's a bit more contentious.
Yeah.
Because maybe like you take the photos, you want to use the photos in other situations as well. And then in that case, maybe you want to hold on to the ownership of the photos. So in that case, you might want to think like, if the client wants the IP in these photos, do you want to charge a fee so that you will assign the copyright to them or not?
But the real scary thing that's advancing now with technology is AI. And whether they can use your face, clone that, use that to train something, and then I don't need you. I've got your image in my little computer doodad, and that's all she wrote, right? So that would be an interesting point of the expansion of how IP rights are now being used in very, very different ways, which is why I always get very, very concerned whenever I see things like the contracting party agrees for infinity worldwide in the known universe across all platforms, whether
face will
now
appear.
or future. Exactly, and
Your voice will appear.
precisely. And that sounds fine if you're just thinking in terms of, oh, but I don't need the IP for this project. But if you're now saying that in the contract, they're allowed to use you forever and ever and ever, they never have to pay you, then you're sort of cutting yourself short, right? And you're kind of making sure that they don't need to pay you or hire you and no one else can hire you ever again.
So it is always in the interest of the service buyers to actually keep contracts broad.
Yeah.
So while they give you a contract, it will be of their interest to keep it broad. But it should be of the interest of freelancers to keep it more precise as much as possible because you know the work. What are some of the areas that you have faced? So for example, in your industries, you know about like overtime fees and all those. It may not be applicable for all creative freelancers. I think this is where we can come in to even be a bit more specific in terms of the community of practices where we can then learn from one another what are the areas to look out for besides the key terms, the good to have terms. Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about contracts, key terms, why it's important. Of course, we all know it's important with contracts, although we don't always get them. But if we do get them and if contracts are breached or they're not adhered to, is there any experiences that you have? And can you share a little bit of what happened?
I think the most common situation that I face when contracts are breached is that payment is late. So maybe my invoice says that I need to be paid by this date, but then payment doesn't come by that date. So what happens? Usually the first step of recourse is to just chill and talk to the client nicely about it because usually it's just like a very honest mistake, like, oh, maybe finance is processing a bit late. So in that case, I don't need to go in all guns blazing and be like, hey, why you haven't paid my contract yet? I mean, haven't paid my invoice yet. Yeah, and when you do that immediately, you're kind of like risking that you're going to sour the relationship. It's only if that doesn't work out that maybe I need to escalate. But so far, I have not had to.
You don't have that experience yet.
Yeah.
I had a negative experience with a postponement, which turned into a cancellation. And because it was a voiceover situation, I presented myself at the date and time, and they said, oh, I think we're going to postpone it by an hour. They're not ready. So I was like, all right, And then they said, oh, by the way, it's canceled. So I said, all right, well, you're canceling on the day of, like 1 hour after the thing was supposed to happen. So I will be invoicing you. And they were like, well, we're not going to pay it. And I said, well, realistically, you asked me to come down at this time at this place for this job. I was here, the studio was here, you were not. And they so just really dug their heels in. And I was in this position where I could have started the process of writing a letter of demand and trying to get all these things sorted. But the reality is that even though we can have gold standard contracts and it's excellent, ultimately you need to think about the time and effort it costs to pursue it.
Not worth the effort
To
sometimes.
me, it wasn't, but it was worth the effort for me to tell everyone I knew that this company operates in this way. So it kind of works both ways. As much as self-employed people, freelancers are worried, oh my gosh, I don't want to be blacklisted. The power of word of mouth works both ways. So please stay connected to your communities. Please stay connected to the people around you. The easiest defense to defamation is the truth. So if what you're saying is 100% truthful and you have all the receipts, spill that tea.
Jaga, I'm pretty sure among your members there have been cases of contracts being breached or not adhered to. What does VICPA do in this case?
So in most circumstances, members come to us for payment issues.
Yes.
Whether is it in the form of no payment, delayed payment, or reduced payment. So as VICPA, we do not actually have a relationship with the company. In the traditional union context, you may have a relationship with the company, but we don't. So what we will do is we will find out the background of the company through the AGRA website. And then after that, we will contact the owner and then speak to the owner and see whether we can actually resolve.
So you do all this on behalf of your member?
Of the member, right? So this is something that we bring to the table for our members and then see whether we can assist. If not, then we escalate further by bringing them to TADEM and see whether we can do a mediation.
Yeah, so TADEM is the Tripartite
Alliance for Dispute Management.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to payment issues, we do go to small claims tribunal. Not everyone knows how to do the filing because you have to do it on your own and then you have to appear there and also to represent yourself and present the facts of your case before you get your money order. That's when the contract is important.
So
because
if they have no contract.
So when you don't have a contract, then you need to go back and look at what else you have, and then you have to try to piece them together into a PDF document. WhatsApp chats are helpful. Yeah, so that's when your WhatsApp chats are helpful, but they need to put that in a chronological order. And then a lot of time has been wasted because that time could be used for you to do work and you could have earned money during that period.
Is that why people usually don't? Because I know a lot of creative freelancers, they usually give up or they just, it's either they don't know the avenues through which they can find help or else they just think it's too much bother and they don't, they just...
I think it's both. So when they don't have contracts, they feel that it's very hard for them to even put the facts up front. So we will then see and assess based on whatever documents they have. We will try to put together a case for them. But if they are unable to, then we have to find other ways to assist. I think the most tricky part will then, if the company is liquidating, that means they are not in the financial situation to pay, that's when I think even VICPA can't help because then the case goes to the liquidator. Then a different process kicks in altogether and the salaries of freelancers are actually not in the top of the queue.
Unsecured creditors of the company. Yeah, it's terrible.
But do you think it's important though to report these cases?
By and large, it is important to report some of these cases also because then you are helping your community know that there is a problem with the company and then they know that this is not a service buyer that you would like to work for. And this will also help shape the behavior of fellow service buyers. I think one of the key advice that VICPA gives our members is, while your service buyers also do a reference check on you, on your profile and what you can offer, could you also then do a simple, today, Google search. Do a simple search on the companies that you want to work for. Don't just do it because you just want to take up a job.
Jaga, can you share maybe an example or a case where VICPA was able to help freelancers to get back their payments, perhaps?
Yeah, so recently I handled a case where a particular group of freelancers were not paid on time, and then they engaged us, some of which were not VICPA members yet. So when they engaged us, we were very clear to them that, they need to be our members in order for us to then assist them. And they were also then skeptical about, can VICPA really help or not, right? And of course, I was also very open and honest with them that, when you join us as a member, we will do our best to assist. And we managed to secure a payment schedule, payment, and this amounted from one of them who's only owed about a few hundreds to someone who's actually owed a few thousands.
Amazing.
Yeah, and 6 of them would actually be getting their payments in a month's time. And this is something I felt very fulfilled. I was very happy when I actually saw it. So immediately when I communicated to them, I think they were also very surprised. And it also helped today when many of them also shared with their circle of friends, and then now a few of them are coming back to us and saying, hey, can you also help me?
Can you share a little bit more about perhaps how the tripartite standards could help freelancers? Because I know not a lot of freelancers or creative freelancers are aware or are familiar with tripartite standards, so maybe you could share a little bit more about that.
So there are a total of 10 tripartite standards, of which 2 are dedicated for freelancers. One is the tripartite standard for contracting with self-employed persons, and that's the most basic. And then there's also a dedicated one for media freelancers, which is a tripartite standard for procurement of media freelancers. So the difference between the two is one had an insurance component, where for those creative professionals who actually have to work on sets, then the insurance coverage has to be provided for. If not, the other terms are quite basic, which is what we talked about earlier: the names, the scope of work, the payment, variation, and dispute resolution. So there are adoptions, meaning that this is not compulsory. So as a standard, a company can come in and say that I would like to adopt the standard. But adoption is only just one step. You need to also implement it in your workflow. But we do have circumstances where companies or even freelancers will feedback to us that a particular company who is a tripartite standard adopter but not following the practices or the principles that's within the framework. That's when we will then raise to TAFEP. In fact, VICPA had one situation, we flagged that up to TAFEP, and TAFEP delisted that company from the tripartite standards. So I think we need to do it in a two-pronged approach where we educate both service buyers and the freelancers. And we have to start from somewhere. And because this is tripartite, we start with government to take the lead in ensuring at least their panel of vendors understand. Awareness is one, but implementation of it in their workflow is critical in order for our industry norms on fair contracting to be more prevalent.
So thank you so much for tuning in for this episode. Of course, thank you to Jagathishwaran as well as Audrey for joining us today and sharing their experiences. Now, if you do have any reactions to this episode or you'd like to share a little bit more about your experience with contracts, do comment below. And as you've seen, it's very important for us to join VICPA so we can get the support and the protection that we need as creative freelancers. So thank you so much for joining us once again, and we'll see you around. Thank you. Bye-bye.